Well, I'm back from my trip. So this is back. Finally, this is my first full day back at home solo. Niels has gone back to Canada. He's back. He flew back yesterday afternoon. Got back late last night to Toronto. Then had to drive a couple hours down to his house, and then we resume our regular stuff now. So after a nice 5-day trip was really the first big test for the Jeep and a lot of equipment that I wanted to test out. And the cool thing about stuff like this is, as long as nothing bad happens, you get to test your equipment out, see what's good, what's bad, what succeeds, what fails, what changes you might want to make. And I've come up, my mind is like always just going to town. I've already started thinking about things that I liked, most of everything worked well, like everything that we tried. And the cool thing about it is we actually got to try a lot of stuff, and not just by, let's try this. Like for example, the winch, we're not in an area that's filled, like a forested area that's filled with trees and mud, to where you might get stuck in mud and need to winch yourself out utilizing a tree. But what we did find up on a cliff's edge on a road that was just following along this goat trail, it was crazy, was a pretty good sized boulder that had fallen in the middle of the road. And the ranger had warned us about it, but I didn't kind of really pay any attention to it. I didn't know. They said that they got by it barely with their stock Jeep, which is narrower than mine. The problem is, the only place you could try to squeeze by was on the cliffside of the road, and I wouldn't have made it with mine. So I was able to utilize the winch, pull it out of the way, and I even told the ranger, I said, hey, if it's that bad, I'll winch it out of the way so other people can pass. So I ended up doing that. It was late in the second day when we actually got to that point. That was pretty cool. But the biggest thing, and everything else on the Jeep worked great. The only things that didn't work good was some of these in-car cameras, whether it be forward-facing or facing like you're seeing right now, the vibration when you're off-road, it was just so bad. It was jarring the cameras. That, I got them mounted to the roll bar, and then they kind of hang down a little bit, and that the distance that they hang down allows for movement, especially when when the Jeep is really rocking. So that's something I'm still looking into. I'm trying something different actually right now, so I don't know what footage I'm going to use, but I'm trying something else out. Other than that, everything worked great. The awning did hit the tent, which is not that big of a deal because I can actually readjust it where it mounts. I needed about another 4 inches. I didn't test that because I just didn't think, I was within 4 inches, so that was pretty close. But the biggest thing is the trailer, okay? And this is really important. So the mindset of bringing the trailer I bought, a year and a half before I even thought about getting a Jeep. I have my F-150 four-wheel drive truck, and I've got my old H2 Hummer that I used to take on these trips. Now, both of those, all vehicles are limited on space inside, but the Hummer was really limited on space. Plus the sleeping arrangements, right? I got my rooftop tent on the trailer. So the theory of the trailer was you could bring, coolers full of water, because it's nice to have ice cold water, right? Ice cold water, a little barbecue, a generator. I got a little Honda generator to recharge batteries. That's the only thing we would use it for. Chairs, miscellaneous stuff like that, extra tools. But putting it behind the Jeep now it's a smaller vehicle. Both those other vehicles one has a V8 and one has a twin turboed V6, my truck, which just is a power horse. It hauls butt. It's got a bunch of torque. Can't even tell the trailer's there. Well, with the Jeep, with this V6, it definitely puts it in an overwork mode. Got really bad gas mileage. Our trip was almost about 1,800 miles round trip. So it got really bad gas mileage. it worked fine. It worked perfectly off-road. I mean, wherever the Jeep went, it went, but it really bounced around. You know, it launched the generator back there, the barbecue flipped over, you know, the cooler was shaking all around. But it held up really good, and I had the rooftop tent. Now, here's the thing, like really looking at it. I had 2 coolers in the trailer. One cooler was just full of water and ice, like 2 cases of water. So we always had ice cold water to drink. The other cooler had some beer in it and food. Like I had some steaks that I took, and I wanted it to be like, we were gonna try and do a little fancier, you know, instead of eating crap, we ate good food. And that's one of those long-term coolers. The coolers like can keep a bag of ice for like 5 days if you don't go in and out of it all the time, which is nice. But we didn't use the generator at all because we had enough batteries and enough multiple cameras that we used. So we didn't use the generator. I only used the barbecue one night, so that was kind of a waste. And we didn't drink all the 2 cases of water, and I had a 3rd case. So theoretically, I could have got like a Tupperware thing and put the steaks in that and kept it in the other cooler. So get down to 1 cooler, no generator, no barbecue. The rooftop tent, you know, it's nice. It pops up really easy. It's like a house, right? But it's still, for me, it wasn't super comfortable. Beside the fact that the wind was blowing, it was going all crazy. I didn't get any sleep, and I haven't been sleeping good in it. And it's not just that; it's a tent, whatever. You know, I'm a heavy guy. You know, I'm heavy, so when I lay down, if my bed isn't firm, I'll just whatever's underneath it, being at the ground, or that rooftop tent, which is just hard, you know, hard material. It's very uncomfortable. So I was like, I'm thinking, you know, is it worth, especially on a trip like that? But I mean, it's like those kind of trips are the ones you really want to do because you're going for 5 days. You never know what you're going to need. You want to take all this extra stuff. I wouldn't take the trailer on a local. I definitely wouldn't take the trailer on a day trip, and maybe even you know, an overnighter, like a 2-day, 1-night trip. With 2 of us in here, we had a fair amount of gear, our clothes, all of our camera gear, which that clothes and camera gear stayed inside. So long story long, I was evaluating. Oh, and I also had the extra gas cans on the trailer, which did come in handy because I did have to fill it up. I probably could have come in like on fumes once we made it all the way back around the 240 miles of off-road before we got back to a fueling station. But those 2 gas cans basically add up to a 1/4 tank of gas in this vehicle. I put them in, and I came in without the light on, but I was under a 1/4, so it would have been really close. Very handy to have. I could find a way to mount those around my spare tire on the Jeep. I could have a cooler in the back here, just utilize 1 cooler. I could just use my regular tent, pitch it on the ground. Because the trailer, as cool as it is, and as much stuff as you can bring, 1, it's hard on the Jeep towing it. 2, it really takes away from like the crazy off-roading that you can do, right? The really more extreme stuff you can't do with that trailer. And the most difficult stuff that we did was like some switchbacks that were really rough. You know, normally switchbacks are a pretty groomed road, it's just steep. Well, these were pretty rough. And there was 180-degree turns, meaning as we were coming down, the road was literally going right back, and there's no room to turn. And it was very difficult with the trailer. Very, very difficult. Made it very dangerous. So I'm looking now to maybe adjust. Obviously, 1- and 2-day trips, no worries. It would be a 4- or 5-day trip with 2 of us. Could I do it without taking the trailer? You know, so I'm looking, tent, check. Single cooler, check. I don't want to overload the Jeep because I want to be able to off-road hard. You know, with the weight that we had in here plus the trailer, this coil springs aren't set up for all that weight, so kind of weighed the Jeep down, and I was hitting my bump stops a lot in the rear, so I was having to drive a little bit more cautiously, which I don't want to do. I want to really be able to get on it. But it was great. It was an absolute beautiful place that we went to. It was incredible off-roading. The views, the weather, we had super hot 110-degree weather. We had 50-degree weather. We had rain, we had hail, we had overcast skies, we had blue skies. It was perfect. You couldn't ask for anything else. Great first trip, 1,800 miles long, a perfect overland trip, which is drive a long way on surface, on freeways and stuff to get there, drive dirt roads, go here, go there. It was perfect. And I was able to test and evaluate all this equipment. Everything good. Now, every time I go, I try and learn something new. And now what I'm doing is trying to figure out a way that if it isn't some crazy trip that we really need a bunch of extra gear, that we can do it without the trailer. And that's my next goal. I mean, I could put the rooftop tent on this. That's one option. There is room on the roof rack for other things. So I'm going to look into something simple, probably, not going too crazy with it. Probably, utilizing a regular tent, forget the rooftop tent, putting a mount for the gas cans on here, and utilizing the cooler inside here. That basically is going to eliminate the need for the trailer. We didn't need to bring firewood because there's no fires allowed in the national park. That's another thing in some of our other trips, that I would bring firewood. So, and then, the small tables, I can fit a table in here. I like the idea of trying to really utilize the space that I have inside the Jeep without taking too much crap and without it being too heavy. I don't want it to be too heavy, because the whole reason to go is to be able to off-road and really get to some remote places, and you can't do that if you're driving a Winnebago full of junk, Other than that, I thoroughly enjoyed the trip. I really like testing out the gear. I love testing out the Jeep. Now I'm looking for maybe some more extreme stuff to test it with, but it's perfect. It's worked out perfect so far. I really, really did enjoy it. And I thought it would be a little bit more uncomfortable driving. We did almost 700 miles just to get to dirt, and then 700 miles back. It was 12-hour days to get there, one to get there, one to get back. And then we did a couple, almost 280 miles off-road. And the Jeep was perfectly comfortable to drive that whole distance. I didn't know if it was going to be, but it was. Well, that's a big plus. You got big 37-inch off-road tires and off-road suspension. It traditionally isn't that comfortable to drive in comparison to my F-150, which is, it's four-wheel drive, but it's built to be really comfortable on the road, extremely comfortable, and it hauls butt. You get out in the middle of nowhere, you can set the cruise control at 90 and still get your fuel efficiency and climb hills and everything else. I really had to work this thing on some of the big hills, downshift to 4,000 or 5,000 RPMs for, however long that grade was to get up. And that's just showing that I was really kind of pushing the weight limits of the Jeep. Plus, it's not the safest thing if you do get into a situation where you need to get up some kind of rock face and you got this dead weight basically behind you. So that's going to be my next new little, new experiment. I love coming up with these things and trying to troubleshoot and figure out how to either fix it or make it better. And that's really fun for me. It's another side to the adventure and the off-roading or overlanding experience. It's not just, all right, let's go. You got to be prepped and ready to go. I basically washed all the clay off the Jeep, got the tar off. I had tar on it because they had freshly paved one of the roads when we came out in the middle of nowhere. So it threw some tar up on the Jeep, got that off pretty much. Other than that, I'm looking forward to some more adventures, and in the short term, I'm looking forward to coming up with some solutions to these little issues that I came up with.